Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our third of 5 sessions on spirituality and conscious leadership, arguably one of the most important qualities and virtues needed in our world today. As I've been reflecting on the situation in Gaza as we've been reporting it, and also in Ukraine and other areas where we've been highlighting unfolding events, what's been occurring to me more and more deeply is the relevance of the prophecies offered by the Kogi seers last December, which we've enunciated a number of times. There's a video that has been produced, which we've shown a number of times. We're approaching in just about 2 weeks now the equinox, leading to the solstice in June. And as we reflect on spirituality and conscious leadership, particularly as we'll dwell on today about how we increase our inner sense of peace and well-being. The prophecies of the indigenous people very generally, but also the Kogi prophecy very specifically, I think pertains to our time in a very, very specific way. We're being told that between December of 2023 and June of 2024, humanity is being called to account, because beginning in the latter part of this year, continuing through 25 and 2026, the mother is going to restore herself with or without us. And that turbulence could well undermine completely the foundations of human civilization. And therefore, the mother calls upon all of us to go very deeply within and search out the deeper truths of our psyche and soul as to how we can begin to attune ourselves to the voice of the mother. Because nothing less than that deep interior fortitude is going to suffice to enable us to navigate through what is coming. So as we look at world events, even though it's terrifying at times to bear witness, the deeper challenge is not the event itself, but how we can develop, strengthen, and enhance the equanimity of our interior in a world that, by all accounts, is escalating not only in external chaos, but in terms of internal stresses. Virtually every indicator of stress, from drug abuse to domestic violence to depressions to anxieties to crime to road rage, are on the increase worldwide. And so the spiritual dimensions of consciousness and the spiritual dimensions of leadership, conscious leadership, become a matter, I would say, of urgent imperative for a people of goodwill, and particularly when framed within the context of Kogi prophecy, that we are in fact entering a time of deep historical, existential reckoning. This is one of the reasons we're making pilgrimage around the solstice in June to the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico, arguably the most potent sacred site in all of the Americas, built in deep antiquity, like the pyramids in Egypt, but constructed with a precision and alignment with the larger cosmic astronomy that to the present day continues to mystify scientists at how these ancient people could be so precise in their measurements and spiritual insight that emerge from these, and to be at the pyramid of the sun on the solstice in light of the Kogi prophecy, and to see the time between now and then as a time of inner purification and inner preparation is what I wanted to tease out today as we begin our conversation about the spirituality of conscious leadership in terms of inner well-being. So thank you, everyone, for joining Humanity Rising. You're all very welcome to our daily commentaries and explorations of the human spirit. I would like to now introduce my good friend and colleague, Tom Eddington, who is the convener of this week, with many thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your opening comments. And I'll just share a bit about, for those of you who haven't been with us earlier in the week, this week is focused on spirituality and conscious leadership, as Jim mentioned. And from my worldview, at least, we are all spiritual beings having a human existence. As many of us hear often, it's becoming a more and more common refrain. But from my perspective, at least, that means that we are a spiritual being, and it doesn't mean that we slice up a portion of our day for our spiritual practice, but we are a spiritual being. And the focus of today's conversation is, how do we honor that? How do we celebrate that? How do we practice that? How do we constantly remind ourselves of who we are as a being? How do we have and maintain a sense of inner peace? How do we maintain a sense of well-being while we are experiencing all that is happening in the world? It's remarkably challenging for us with what's happening in the media, what's happening in the news, what's happening in our daily life. And so I'm just delighted to have a group of folks with us today who are going to help us explore a couple of dimensions of inner peace and well-being. Certainly from a perspective of how do they define it, but also what are some of the challenges that we all face, and what are some practical approaches and techniques that we can use to sustain a sense of inner peace and well-being. So with that, I would love to welcome my good friend and colleague, Dan McCann. Some of you have probably seen Dan before on a couple of programs we've done together. Dan is the CEO of an organization called Risio. Welcome, Dan. Good to have you with us today.
You. And hi, everybody.
And go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, delighted. And joining us today is Azim Jamal and Natasha Senra. Welcome, Natasha. Welcome, Azim.
Thank you, Tom.
So I'd love to just jump right into this conversation. For each of you, how do you define inner peace and well-being? And Dan, maybe we start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think inner peace and well-being, or spiritual practices, are so personal. They're activities or experiences often designed to develop or grow or enhance someone's ability to be in more understanding or connection with themselves and maybe the universe or a greater power. And of course, just like people, they can vary just as much as cultures, religions, individuals. But for me, anyways, it often shows up in my life and in my loved ones and in with clients that I work with in areas like meditation, mindfulness, prayer, affirmations, rituals, contemplation. To contemplate that word. Music, art, or acts of compassion or service, deep presence. Some of you might know I grew up with many dogs, as many as 18 at one point in my life, and always a constant flow of about a pack of 10. And so for me, in my own way, connecting with deep presence through a loving relationship with animals brings me into a place of inner peace and well-being. I guess I'd say it's probably a little bit different for everyone, but we share so much universality that I'm imagining Azim and Natasha may have some common threads.
Yeah, Azim, what about you? How do you define inner peace and well-being?
So for me, inner peace is really about being true to yourself, true to myself. And basically, we have a purpose in life when we are born, and we've been given a gift to apply it for our purpose. And the more I use my gift and apply to the purpose and optimizing my abilities is very important, because I feel I'm blessed living in Vancouver. I'm blessed not to be in the war-torn areas. I'm blessed with everything around me, and with blessings come responsibility. And so I think, to me, inner peace comes when I do my best. And yes, there are things I cannot control, for which I can pray and send energy, but do not get so overwhelmed with it, because if it's in my control, then I have a responsibility to do something about it. So as long as I remain true to that, I have inner peace. And anytime I swear from it by doing something wrong or having some kind of ill willing for some other person who is part of me, we are all, as Rumi says, we are all, fellow travelers in the journey of life, and we all face the same seasons of life. If I hurt another human being, I'm hurting myself. So that's part of the inner peace. In terms of the well-being, I think it's the well-roundedness. My whole concept is corporate Sufi, and it's corporate is business, and business meaning that you have to do well in your material life to be able to support your family and serve the humanity in some way. And Sufi is the mystic who, is very much in peace within. So the well-being comes from the holistic approach of looking after my family, my health, my spirituality, my lifelong learning, my finance, and my work.
And real quick before we go to Natasha, in the corporate Sufi work that you do, what do you find with your clients, and what do you tell them, and how do you help them find inner peace and well-being?
So I've been very fortunate, because every leader I've worked with in the last 25 years has three challenges. The first challenge is, even if I was working with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Tim Cook, doesn't matter who the leader is. The first challenge is that business for every leader is a work in progress. It's never a finished product. So every leader, no matter how good they are or how successful they are, they're always continuously trying to improve the business. So that's one part. The second is the balance between, as I mentioned, the spirituality, the health, the family, the lifelong learning, the finance, and the work. So everybody's juggling with that. And the third area is what I call the beyond, which is the finding the deep desire to find meaning, to find purpose, to find happiness in what I do. So it's a synergy of business, balance, and beyond is something every leader faces. They can talk in many different languages or different ways, but at the end of the day, in essence, it is 3 areas. And I've been very fortunate, because I was a professional accountant in my past life. I had 3 degrees. I was an ACCA from England, a CPA, and a chartered financial planner. So I understand business. In terms of balance, I grew up in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I was born there. And in our family, we had 43 people in one house. My grandfather had 11 children, 11 spouses, and all the kids. We stayed together. So I grew up in balance in my household in Tanzania. Then I moved to Kenya, moved to England, moved to Canada, married a wife from India. So I have a balance between that. In my house in Vancouver, my mom, my dad, my grandma, my son, my daughter, my wife, we stayed together. So there was the other balance. And my kids are totally Western, and my children totally Eastern, and I'm the sandwich. So I had the balance there. And the beyond, I've been meditating for many years. So the beyond part is very much part of who I am. And I wrote my first book, 7 Steps to Lasting Happiness. So I understand happiness. So I have these 3 skills which really match what the leaders need. So that's been a big blessing for me.
Thank you. And Natasha, how about for you?
Hi. Hello everyone. When it comes to inner peace, I really had to learn how to stop manipulating my external environment, which is what I teach. So I'm a psychotherapist because I spent my whole life trying to make people respect my boundaries, listen to me, hear me, respect me. I knew the way, learn about my consciousness. And so I really had to shift and understand that inner peace really comes from understanding that the external world is here to show you more about you than it is for you to intrude on it. So that was definitely an inner focus. And I really appreciate what Jim said about purifying and preparing yourself enough to hear and listen your highest wisdom and guidance. And you can only do that when you're still. And I spent decades learning how to be still. So I'm happy to talk about that. And I'm thrilled to be with you all.
And what do you impart on your clients, Natasha?
Well, I impart on them to move away from this idea that they've been selfish and shifted into this idea of healthy self-interest. As much as we're talking about leadership, you're the first energy that you need to steward. And so I find that the external focus on leadership sometimes needs to come back to how am I leading my own life? I love them talking about wife and partners and children, and same with me. I'm a boss at work, but if I'm not leading my own children in kindness, love, and grace and presence, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that last point for a moment with the 3 of you. So from my perspective in the work I do, I view that all of us are being called to be leaders in the world. And the responsibility we have first and foremost is self-leadership. And so if you've got some more you'd like to share there, Natasha, and then I'll ask Dan and Azim to comment on that. But what are your thoughts on the self-leadership piece?
Thanks. I think the self-leadership piece is huge. Most of my clients understand my history because I model the work of neuroscience and psychedelics and other work that I do based on the transformation in my own life. Like I have every reason to behave like a wild animal based on everything that has happened to me in my life. And I often joke that the creator, the universe, knew to make me small. I'm only 5'1", because if I was any bigger, I'd probably be in prison, right? So the self-leadership piece came from the idea of stewarding my own energy, where the violence and aggression within me has no business being in the world or on the planet. So how do I transmute that energy using really grounded spiritual practices, using plant-based medicines, not for an experience, but for the purposes of healing, and then harnessing the latest research in neuroscience to actually move the energy out of your neural pathways. And so if I have no business speaking to anybody else about leadership, if on my off time I'm getting into fights at the gas station. So that's what I would say about that.
Dan, Azim, how about for the 2 of you? Your thoughts on self-leadership?
Sure. I'm going to pick up on some of the threads you touched on there, Natasha. For me, conscious leadership and self-leadership is really about authenticity. And nowadays, people, if they don't consciously recognize, they feel if people are showing up in a way that's inauthentic. And I've been really fortunate to have some really incredible role models and guides. Some people on the call here will know the clinical founders of Riseo Institute, which I lead today, Dr. Marty Glenn and Ken Brewer. And what I've learned in the last many years in their mentorship is how to show up fiercely authentic and how to tune into your heart center when that voice is in your head of self-doubt. Should I say what's really on my mind? I'm in a capacity of leadership right now, so maybe it's inappropriate for me to bring all of me into this space and name that something is, difficult in my family health situation or at home. And what I've learned over time is that actually that allows people to relax and show up with more of themselves, and for them to really trust you and trust that you're bringing all of you to the relationship. And nowadays, I aspire to cultivate and be part of teams and leadership teams that have that as the foundation.
And Azim?
Yeah, no, just to build on what Dan and Natasha have already said, I think it's amazing how much power we have as an individual, meaning how influential we all are in the way we are as a human being in terms of our presence, to our children, to our spouse, to our family, to our friends, to our clients, to everybody. And when you take 100% responsibility, which is you're 100% responsible to your life, that's self-leadership. I know I've stayed with my father for more than 40 years. And my father never told me I should serve people. He never told me that. He's passed away now, may his soul rest in peace. But I watched him serve all the time. So when I grew up, serving others was so natural for me. He didn't have to tell me. So you realize with words, you can only preach. With action, you teach. So as a leader, you're not teaching by your words, you're teaching by your action, the way you live your life. That's one. Secondly, is really being, having that heightened awareness to really realize, what impact are you making, positive or negative, in what you do. So for example, I try to every day, at the end of the day, I ask myself, if I had to live this day again and I rewind the clock, what would I change? And every day there's one thing you would change. I was in Puerto Rico recently. I was working with my clients, and there was a day on a Sunday. I had a great day. In the morning, I had been asked to go for breakfast at my client's house. So I was walking to his place, and I had a call from Dubai. So with somebody I had to talk to. So I talked for 45 minutes on the call, and my client has a garden across his house, and I went for breakfast at his house. Another client picked me up for lunch. We did a mission, vision, values exercise at a lunch place in somewhere, and a really good lunch. Then I walked 45 minutes because I had 2 more calls to make, one from Edmonton, one from Toronto, to another place. And after that, I had dinner at some other client's house for 4 hours. 9 p.m., I went to my apartment and I looked at emails for an hour. And then I wrote my journal. And I said, if I had to leave this day again, what will I change? I said, I wouldn't change anything except the last hour. That emails I watched messed my whole... I slept late, I woke up late next morning, and my whole day was messed. But then one thing, the next day I made sure there was no emails at night. So if you relive your day, you realize, am I being the leader I want to be, or where am I messing up? Because every minute is precious, every hour is precious, every time is precious. And so how do you optimize yourself? And I think the more aware you become, the more transformational you can become.
Yeah, thank you for that. So picking up on Azim's comment about the emails being an obstacle, for you, Natasha, what are some of the common obstacles you hear from clients, and what do you help them navigate?
I think I help us navigate the fact that we're human. Like, I think that that's sort of the biggest thing. And even sort of touching on that, I can't go back to this idea of healthy self-interest anymore. The idea that I'm not going to master anybody else. And when I'm mastering myself or just getting to a place of my own enlightenment, bringing light to the darkness that I carry, it's this idea of my own self-compassion. It feels really good to just watch YouTube or The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills sometimes. I just have to go to this idea of the compassion and grace I hold within myself and the human parts of me that want to shut down a bit, how I'm stewarding all of myself. And that compassion and grace is really important. So I often talk about how important it is to understand my own spirituality, my own consciousness, my own purpose, my own presence on the planet, and the personality of Natasha, the girl that just wants to experience the humanness of being here. So I think that's kind of how I talk to my clients about, can we give ourselves a break? Of course, you were a wild animal to your husband. He moved the toaster when you didn't ask him to. How can we right, bring compassion to that part so that we don't have to behave that way again?
And do you see any common themes or things that people bring to you in session that are obstacles that you want to talk about a bit more?
I think this is the main obstacle, and it's this idea of how hard we are on ourselves. I think it's just that. It's about how quick we are to want to cut off our humanity and our indulgences and our, places where we're not so proud of the way that we're leading ourselves. If we could soften all of that, we'd find that we actually don't need to engage in any of those behaviors as much. That really is the definition of self-love. And so that's the common obstacle that I see, regardless of what you're working on. Am I lovable? Am I worthwhile? Do I have value? Am I serving? Am I contributing? Am I good enough? It's like, can we just have compassion for the fact that universally we're all struggling with that?
What about for you, Dan? What are some obstacles you hear within the RISEO community? And for you personally, what are some obstacles you'd like to speak to?
Sure. Thanks for that context, Natasha. You named the big overarching ones for sure there. And RISEO is fortunate to have Natasha as one of our great coaches and therapists who really gets all of this topic. So jumping in from what you set there contextually, I would say some of the common challenges, like the day-to-day tactical challenges that I and clients and community members in the RISEO world have are, feelings of maybe mindfulness and meditation is not for me. I can't slow down my racing mind to stay grounded and centered and be in the present moment. So much of our experiences can be anxiety, future forecasting and worrying or ruminating of things that have happened in the past. And so inviting people to find what works for them, to come into the present moment and then come into present moment awareness of their body is a really great step towards mindfulness and meditation. For me, breath has really been the bridge as someone who, has a busy mind, coming into connection with my own heartbeat and my breath along the way to feeling that. I grew up playing a lot of sports, and so physical activity can be so important, whether that's yoga or walking or, just getting outside in nature. I think other things that come up are sometimes overlooked: the importance of quality sleep, the importance of positive social connections, which so many of us really realized during the pandemic, how important that is to our inner peace and well-being. Healthy boundaries, and there's so many different ways we could take that, of course. Boundaries to do with yourself and with others, with your relationship with technology, with work. I would say time management is a big one, and not sort of rushing from one place to the other and kind of always being in this busy, gotta do. Someone I really respect likes to say that we're human beings, not human doings. And so trying to remember to come into that connection with being and rest, gratitude, and the mind is like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive sometimes. And so making daily gratitude practices, whether you routine stack or habit stack around when you're having a meal or going in an elevator or taking the stairs. I would say the last probably one that I think is so important to point out nowadays is limiting media consumption and technology use, being aware of the doom scrolling and kind of coming into connection with things that bring you joy and bring you closer to your heart space and into connection with others.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Azim, anything else you want to add to the conversation about obstacles?
I think a couple of things. We make things too complicated. I was one day doing a talk with Brian Tracy in South Africa. We had a few thousand people at our event, and then we went to do a radio interview somewhere. And as we finished the radio interview, we were driving to the hotel, and I asked Brian Tracy, did you ever meet Og Mandino? And Og Mandino is a guy who sold 50 million copies of his books, and his book changed my life. I was struggling to get going, and I was almost giving up my career. And his book fell on my lap, and he was going to commit suicide, and ended up selling 50 million copies. And so I asked him, did you ever meet Og Mandino? And he says to me, are you kidding? Just like we went for the interview and you're going to the hotel, I used to do that all the time with Og Mandino. And I was having good goosebumps because now I'm sitting with him doing interviews. So anyway, I asked him to share a story. And he said one day, as they were driving to the hotel, he told Og Mandino, your books are too simple to read. So Og did not respond. He just ignored the comment. He just continued with other stuff. 10 minutes later, Og is telling Brian, do you know why my books are so simple? So that means he hadn't forgotten the comment. He was processing it. So Brian said, I don't know why they're so simple. So Og told him, because Brian asked him, why are they so simple? He said, because they're so hard to write. So to keep things simple is very difficult. And when we simplify our life, it becomes a bit more easier to handle obstacles. Yeah, that's one part. And the other part is Wayne Dyer's quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's how we look at things make our peace go away. The obstacles are all about is how we are processing things, how we are looking at things. But when you change how you look at the obstacle becomes a blessing. No obstacles, no challenge, no hurdles, no failures, no success, right? Because we have so much power, so much potential, and it's only tapped when you have obstacles, when you have hurdles, when you have challenges, you tap into your genius. So we need them to optimize our life, basically, right?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'll just pick up on something. For me, I guess it's probably been about 15 years ago. I was facing some really difficult challenges in my life, and I took some time to reflect on what do I, because I felt like my whole life was out of control. And so I had to examine, what do I actually have control over? And the conclusion I came to were there are only 4 things that we as humans have control over. We have control over our thoughts. We have control over our feelings. We have control over our actions. And we have control over the stories we tell ourselves. And I've yet to find that there's anything else that we can control as an individual. And just adopting that way of seeing the world, that way of experiencing the world, removes so many obstacles. And it allowed me to shift my way of being in the world and my relationship with others, my relationship with things that were happening around me. And I'd love the 3 of you to just share and comment on that. And certainly if you've got something else to add to that list, I've yet to find anything else, but would love to hear.
I do. And I love that because yes, we have control over those 4 things, but if you don't have control over those 4 things, I say to my clients, please get in the shower. It is so hard to blow up your life from the shower, let me tell you. You are not texting your boss from the shower. You're not selling your house and moving to Fiji from the shower. It's actually a really important neuroscience strategy also, because if you get hijacked, right, if you're now perceiving the world from a very young or traumatized place, it feels very real to you. And the research shows it takes at least 28 minutes for you to be able to come back to your wise adult self, who knows that Fiji probably isn't the right place for you because you don't work virtually. So it takes at least 28 minutes in the non-traumatized brain. Or if you were a wild animal in your young development, it can take us up to 3 days. I like to call that the resurrection. So those strategies are really important. If my mind starts telling me that I need to take action immediately, but there's nothing actually happening in my present environment, I know that that's a trick to get me to replicate and recreate patterns that are not healthy for me or the world at large. So my little hack and obstacle, unless there's someone with an axe standing in front of you threatening you, you got nothing to do in this moment. And if you can't stop yourself from doing it, shower immediately. So that's helpful. I had no skin in 2017.
Dan, Azim, your thoughts on what can we actually control with our lives or in our lives?
Sure, I can go next. I really appreciated Natasha's build on yours, Tom, adding in the traumatized brain and how that may be a little bit different. I think that's an important distinction. So it was thoughts, feelings, actions, and the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty great list. I'm just noticing in the webinar chat here some mentions of physical body awareness and breath. And I think for me, if we simplify things, kind of as Azim said, sometimes we overcomplicate. In my experience, it all comes down to breath at the end of the day. And in some ways, it's what Natasha is saying too. Like if you strip everything else back, you can control your connection to your body and coming into that sense of energetic center, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling the connection to the earth, and tuning into your awareness through breath. That's what I would add.
Azim?
Yeah, so I'll share a story. I was at my daughter's apartment in Kenya in December of 2022, and she had called some friends. She's doing some social work in Kenya, and all the kids, all the friends that she had called are all doing social work. And we're talking about New Year's resolutions at that point. So then we went around, and I said my daughter had a resolution in 21 about, she said one word. I said, what's your word? She says intuition. I said, how can you have one word for a resolution? So I used my word authentic. But in 2022, we were discussing and we went around and they came to me and asked me, what's going to be my resolution in 2023? And I told them that my resolution is every single day of my life has to be the most happiest and the most impactful day. And the power of that is, I'm only responsible for today. And today I want to be happy. And the only time I'm going to be unhappy is if I cheat, if I lie, if I do bad things, then I deserve to be unhappy. If somebody else does that, it's not my problem. It's their problem. So I don't give up my happiness so easily. It's very valuable for me. And then, of course, to make the most impactful day of my life, right? So if I have an obstacle or if I'm going through a down thing or whatever, I ask myself, I go back, I like to write, okay? So I take a fresh piece of paper. Say, what will make my day today the most happiest and the most impactful? I write 2 or 3 things down, I'm excited again. Because now I'm focusing on what I will need to do and not what my mind is saying. As you mentioned, I think the 4 things you mentioned were phenomenal, that covered most of the stuff. But it gives me that energy that I have to worry about today, and my day is not finished. See, it's not over till it's over. Can I share one more story, or it's too much?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was in Paris in 1999, many years ago. There was a European Cup final between Manchester United and Bayern Munich, and I support Manchester United. And the game was in Barcelona, so I taped the game and I wanted to watch the game, but I had a seminar whole day. So after the seminar was over, I said, I'll go home and watch the final. But my client said, you have to come home for dinner. So I went to his house for dinner, and as I entered the dining table, the big TV was on. 90 minutes are over. Okay, the game is over, almost over, and Manchester is losing 1-0. So I lost watching the game. I watched all the drama, and my team is losing. And I'm sitting there sulking, and there's 2 minutes extra time. It's a true story. In 2 minutes, Manchester scored 2 goals and won the cup, and they won the treble at that time. So what's my point is, it's not over till it's over. So day is not over until you go to sleep and 24 hours are gone. So even if you had a bad day, there's 2 hours left, it's still not over. And life is no different. No matter how old you are, it's not over yet. So yeah, those are the things that help me overcome my obstacles.
Yeah, for me, I embraced the mantra of "we'll see" a number of years ago, because the reality is, from moment to moment, we don't know what the future has in store for us, and what we hold in any given moment that feels like it's the worst day of our life or the worst moment or worst experience. We learn 5 years or 10 years in the future, it was actually a gift to us. And we just don't know. And I find that mantra is valuable for me. But just want to pick up on the resolution story for a moment. I let go of resolutions about 15 or 20 years ago because I found them to be too egocentric. And it suggested or implied that I had control over the world, and it was getting in the way of my inner peace and my well-being. And so I embraced the idea of setting an intention, which was to invite the universe, source, God, Yahweh, whatever you want to recognize, has the ability to surprise and delight us. And so by setting an intention, it's an invitation to source to say, this is what I think, but I absolutely welcome you to surprise and delight me. And every year, similar to what you were describing about your daughter, I will come up with a word, and I'll set that as my intention for the new year. And every year I get surprised by what actually happened. Dan, did you have something you wanted to share?
I was going to throw a a challenge to the group. I'm fortunate that I've known all three of you, Natasha, Azim, and Tom, for a great number of years now. And so if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear each person share a little bit of their story of the moment that their life changed and they were called into service or into their path. You know, there's so many different principles and frameworks we can share today, but when it comes to conscious leadership and spirituality or working in service-based industries, I find it really grounds the conversation and humanizes it to hear that. And so I know little tidbits of each yours, and I'm happy to share mine. It looks like Azim's feeling what I'm putting down.
I was going to invite you, Dan, to go first since you planted that seed.
Sure, I'm happy to. So as you mentioned at the beginning, Tom, today I lead Risio Institute as the CEO, and it comes from a heritage of peri and prenatal psychology, or pre or post birth, group therapy, and somatic psychotherapy, mind-body connection. But before that, my background was much more traditional business, media, and technology, and have founded and scaled different tech companies and a family business. And, you know, those experiences of kind of working with large global sexy brands like Cirque du Soleil and you know, big companies like Johnson & Johnson, or my own initiatives, I would say they were creative, intriguing, exciting, even meaningful, but I wouldn't necessarily call any of them fully conscious or in connection with true authenticity. And along my journey, I took a break and I went to Asia to backpack and to see how things were happening on the other side of the world. And on my way to a bit of a spiritual pilgrimage in India, I stopped in a little island and I went on a nature tour and had a sort of universal sign, a bit of a scare or a near-death accident where I was out hiking and I lost my balance, slipped and fell over a cliff and down two waterfalls, and was in the sort of peak of my health and fitness and perhaps even young male invincibility complex of taking on the world, and was brought face to face with the reality that profit and building big commercial intent is great, but it's not anything if you don't have health, and that the true scarce resource in the world is healthy time on the planet. And so for me, I, you know, kind of came crashing down and landed in a pool of water at the edge of a 40-foot waterfall, and had lost my ability to make any noise or any sound to call for help. And my body was in a state of shock. And I was just so grateful to be not moving. And, you know, so many things kind of flashed before me. And when I was in the operating room alone, because I'd been backpacking alone, I had a brief interaction with the head MD who said, you know, best case scenario, we don't have to operate. Worst case scenario, paralysis from the waist down. And we'll just have to wait and see what the scans say. And so I had a pretty nervous hour, you know, where I had to think, what could this mean for the future for me? And what do I actually want to do? What kind of changes do I want to bring about in the world? And it sort of seems silly, but I grew up playing a lot of sports, especially hockey. Basketball was more recreational, but the first image that came to my mind was of possibly, you know, if I had no other option, playing in the Special Olympics, if that was what was to come next. And the next thought was, you know, I want to create a national or ideally global company that has impact and helps people. And if I have to, I could do that in a wheelchair. And so I kind of came face to face with some internal resilience. And from that place began to focus my time and the most valuable resource that I have in my time in helping bring forward that mission.
Well, it's great, great that you made it, Dan, and really appreciate you sharing. Azim, how about for you, your personal journey and how you arrived at this place?
Great question. Great question. So, in 1997, it was 98, 97, October, I had gone to Karachi, Pakistan, as an accountant to do budgeting for refugees. And while I was there for 6 weeks, many things happened that shook me. But one particular incident, I went to a camp where I was interviewing 11 refugees in a small hut. And as I entered the hut, there was no place to sit. There was mattresses, there was kitchen, there was washroom, but no place to sit. Everybody's sitting on the floor. So I sat on the floor in a round circle, and they gave me a small hot cup of tea. And I took a sip. As I took a sip, I look around, everybody has a glow in their face. I said, what happened? I just took a sip. It made me realize that they had nothing to give me but this small hot cup of tea. And because I took a sip, they felt so happy that I accepted their little offer. It made me realize that you don't have to be rich to give. Rather, you become richer when you give. So for them to give that small cup made them feel richer. But then I had a chat with them as I was trying to do budgeting, and the stories I heard shook me so much that in 25, 30 minutes, I was feeling physically sick. As I walk out of the hut, there are small young children outside, and I don't know if you've seen an Afghan child. They have rosy cheeks, smile on their face despite their plight. And they were looking at me, as if I'm going to help them. And I was sick and I was shaken by the stories I'd heard. And so I had to walk away from them. But I had a deep connection in that meeting of their eyes. And I took a cab to my hotel. So 25-minute ride from the camp to my Marriott hotel. And at the back of the cab, I was sobbing like a baby. I was shivering and I was sweating. It was a hot, hot day. And I was shivering. Have you ever experienced shivering and sweating? And so that 25-minute ride was the defining moment in my life. I had a sleepless night. When I woke up in the morning, I had a fork. I can continue my lifestyle. I go left and forget about the experience, or I go right and do something drastic. And I was in a dilemma. But in that split second, something happened to me. And I realized, I need to help people like that. And as an accountant, I had 4 businesses or 3 businesses. I could give them some money, but it's a drop in the ocean because there are 700 million people like that. And so I realized that, I had a gift to inspire. And I said, if I change my career and talk about giving, write about giving, I could make a big difference. So I set a vision, a big vision, more than anything I would have ever dreamed as an accountant. I said how many books I will sell, how much money I'll raise, and I got so excited, I almost stumbled into my purpose, and it was a priceless gift. And of course, I struggled for 10 years. My wife didn't allow me to sell my accounting business, and thank God I listened to her, otherwise I've been broke. But then after 10 years, I started doing better, and it's been 25 years now. But I would do it again. I would go through all the struggle again, because the joy I've got, my vocation has become my vacation. I went to transform the lives of others, my life got transformed. And as I started to aspire, the universe conspired. I shared this story in my TEDx talk called Live to Give, if somebody wants to watch it, but I share the whole story. But that was my turning point in my life. And, my life has become so much better. I feel much more younger. I was 43. I was telling Natasha yesterday, I was 43 when I changed my life, and if you see me at 43, I looked older than I look now. I look 43 now, I think. Anyway, that's my story.
Yeah, thank you, Azim. Natasha.
Hi, thanks everyone for sharing theirs. For me, I kind of knew very early on that I was always going to devote my life to some level of psychology and transformation for other people. I just didn't realize how I was going to do it. And I went very much the traditional psychotherapy way. I always say no one has had more therapy than me. I promise you. I started very young. And I was trained by the best. I worked at, a large mental health hospital in Canada. So I have all the traditional psychology degrees, certifications. I worked in forensics. I worked in prisons. I worked with psychotic sex offenders mostly, and then I worked with their victims, because that's how called and devoted I was to sort of change the planet when it came from the most abusive and most heartbreaking places. And what I came to realize, which I've already sort of alluded to before, is we can't change the heart, the psyche, the mind, the body, the spirit from the mind that is stuck and trapped. And it unfortunately took the destruction of my own life when it came to divorce. My babies were still in diapers when I left, and I had to trust that I would be carried. I had no background in spirituality. A lot of the victimization of my family and my life was being raised in the Roman Catholic Church and with the mentality of enduring. So there was no way I was shifting into spirituality. Zero, not going to happen. But when I hit the wall with all of the traditional methods available to me, again in psychology, I was desperate enough to do psychedelics with a man named Magic D on top of an apartment above a small appliance store that specialized in stolen cell phones. This is sort of where I was, but I was guided there and opened up the whole world for me in understanding non-ordinary states of consciousness and sacred ceremony. And then moving into neuroscience modalities, again, to access non-ordinary states of consciousness in order to heal and really work from a place of love. So my whole practice is devoted to people like me who really wanted to do the work and just weren't able to find the mediums to do the work that worked for them. And then to open up into a whole realm of grounded spirituality that really healed a lot of the damage that's been done to us, not by spirituality, but by how people weaponize spirituality. So I don't know, the fact that I'm here, heart open, loving people, my ex-husband, the animals that raised me, really wanting to change the world from a place of understanding where we are, is kind of how I got here. So thank you guys for letting me be here today.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I mean, what as a student of conscious leadership over the last 20 years, one of the things I always look at is how do people get to the place where they are? And your story, Dan, very similar to mine. Many of us will get there through a health crisis or a life-threatening illness or accident. Others will have an experience very much like yours, Azim, where you witness the presence of the universe, the presence of source, of spirit. And Natasha, for you, very much that you're just hitting the wall of life. And then there are some folks who will get there through their academic research and curiosity and part of just who we are as a species. And it's part of why I'm so motivated to do weeks like this week and to shows like today and have the three of you on, is to help the audience understand there are lots of ways to get to inner peace and well-being. And there's no right or wrong way to get there, but it's both the destination and the journey of life, is to get to that place of realizing it's the path that we're on, and to embrace that and walk that path. So I just want to honor and thank each of you for being here and sharing your stories. And I'm just curious if there's anything else that we haven't touched on in terms of just practical approaches, practical techniques, things that people can do. Natasha and Dan, you certainly both know about polyvagal nurturing and the way that can help help us with centering and creating new neural pathways. But I'm just wondering if there are other things that we could gift our audience with your background and experience.
Do you want us to do some vagal nurturing now? Yes, I'm happy to lead it, everyone.
Go for it.
Do it.
Fun little tip when we were talking about presence. Those of you that have children or people in your physical environment, and even if you don't, and it's virtual, but are you actually looking at the person that you're talking to? That's sort of the big one. Am I just getting the information from my child so I can problem solve, or am I really with them? And so this little technique, vagal nurturing, is something that I do every day before I pick them up from school, just to get the humanness of me to slow down a bit and to really be present. So
And this is in lieu of taking the 28-minute shower.
sometimes I've picked them up 28 minutes late for school because that shower was necessary. But yes, this is in lieu. So we're not going to get into too much about what the vagus nerve is, unless of course Dan wants to talk about it. But basically it's the nerve that runs your life. It's what tells you that you're safe in the world, that you can actually be present from your 43-year-old self or however old you are. And if that nerve isn't well developed and myelinated in infancy and childhood, not to worry, you can myelinate it now. And that's what we're going to teach you to do right now. So this nerve runs from your ears, wraps around your eyes, down through your jaw, to your heart, wraps around all of those organs that helps you digest your food. And so a way that we can nurture this vagus nerve so that we can myelinate and strengthen it and keep you here and out of the shower is by this little exercise developed by Dr. Marty Glenn and Ken Brewer out of the Risio Institute. And it goes something like this. I invite you to join. First, we're all going to be very silly together, and we're going to pull on our ears like we're a monkey. And you're going to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, with the exhale twice as long as the inhale. Then you're going to hold your eyes, breathing in through the nose, breathing out, like you're breathing out of a straw. And then we're going to go to the jaw. We're going to breathe in, out, letting our body know that we're here, March 2024. And then we're going to go to the heart, sending love to ourselves, breathing in and out, thanking the bodies that carry us. And then we're going to slip down to just below the belly, breathing in, breathing out. Thank you for digesting my food. One hand back up to the heart, one still on the belly, breathing in, breathing out. I'm present on the planet. And then making a little bit of eye contact because I'm on the planet with you. Very grateful to receive and to give. Thank you all.
Thanks for sharing that, Natasha. Dan, Azim, either of you have other techniques or things that you would like for our audience to share or to learn about?
Yeah, I'll jump in just quick and thank Natasha for leading us in that vagal nurturing. For those of you that are interested and want to do that again, I put the Vimeo link there with Risio's clinical founder, Dr. Marty Glenn, who invented that. And it's a great practice to do daily, and it's great to do with kids. It really, as Natasha was saying, brings you into that present moment and myelinates the vagus nerve or thickens the vagus nerve, which has so much to do with feeling safe in our nervous system. Other things like eye contact, you can do even with strangers. And Dr. Marty Glenn loves to always say, sometimes that can feel scary for a lot of us to do with loved ones. Sometimes it can feel uncomfortable to do it with strangers on the street. So she always will use the example of when she's paying for something at the grocery store, holding onto the receipt for an extra second and just having a moment of presence and eye contact with someone. Other really practical things I would just mention are something we call ABC. A, aware, B, breath, C, connect. And that can be something you do when you recognize that you may just be feeling kind of buzzy or feeling kind of numb, in psychological terms, we would call that maybe being out of your window of presence, in hyperarousal above your window or hypoarousal below your window. And so if you notice that you're in a state of activation, figuring out what that is for you to come back into that present moment, whether that be polyvagal vagal nurturing, whether that be a shower, whether that be playing with your dog or a child, or going out for a walk in nature, or if you only have a few seconds, taking a moment to be aware of your experience, connect in, take a breath, and then connect to a truth or a practice like that. So many more we could talk about. Check out the links that are being dropped in the chat. Azim?
So for me, I believe that service is a spark ignition. You know, you want to start to create a spark. My latest book is called Spark, Journey from Success to Significance. But service is the spark ignition. So whenever I want to do something to get started, I do some service. It could be a simple thing as answering a phone or somebody who's asked for help or whatever it is. And the moment I do that, my whole energy changes from whatever things I'm thinking to somebody else. So that's why service is so powerful, because it takes away from your ego about your obstacle, because all obstacles in the book I wrote, 7 Steps to Lasting Happiness, my first book, which I struggled to sell, was that somebody asked me, I spent 10,000 hours writing the book and I couldn't put a book in the bookstore. And somebody asked me one day, you know, if you were to summarize the 10,000 hours in one thing, what would you say? So I said it would be difficult, but if I was to say something, I would say 99% of our unhappiness comes from the ego. And they said, prove it. I said, I can prove it. You write down your problems, 100 problems, 10 problems, 20 problems, 100 problems. And you go through each problem, guess what? In each problem, you're involved. If you're not involved, there's no problem. So who's the problem? That's the negative ego. It's not the positive pride, which is powerful because you use your gift to make a difference. But the negative ego is where all the unhappiness and obstacles come. So when you serve, suddenly you get out of that mode and go into somebody else's life, and suddenly you forget about your problem. Huh?
Yeah, thank you all. And I particularly appreciate, Azim, your focus on service. You know, I've said on many broadcasts that I'm inspired by as Warren's introduction in his English translation of the Gita, where he says the opportunity of life is to serve, to give, to love, and I add a fourth, which is to create.
If you have closed fist, you can receive. If you give, the more in the flow of giving you are, the more you go of receiving, right? So it's basically the universal nature always keeps giving, right? Non-stop. Yeah. The sun never says to the earth, you owe me after eons of light I've given you. With a love like that, you shine you light the whole sky, right?
Natasha, you looks like you've got something there to share.
No, I just think for some people like me, and this is just our connection to the word service, if you're raised in such a way where you're always giving, the word service can be very triggering to us. So I use the word contribution all the time because I'm like, I've served my whole life, thank you. So now, just for other people that are like your girl here, the word contribution just always sat for me in a way that I was still me. And I was contributing from my heart to you. So I don't know, maybe after another sacred plant medicine journey, I'll get onto the service side. But for right now, I'm contributing.
No, I think that's really great. It's something I was talking to a client about recently, and how to try and be in service or be in connection with another, while not compromising your relationship with yourself. And that balance is one that we all have to walk, and one that evolves throughout life through different stages and different relationships. So I really like that reframing, Natasha. Thanks.
You know, just to build on Dan, service is in all walks of life, right? And also serving yourself is not selfish. It's selfless. If you serve yourself, you can serve others, right? It's an inside-out approach, right? So I think not to forget that service is not just serving others, but also serving self, and also service in all walks of life, in family, in charity, in business too. I mean, if you serve your customers well, you grow, business grows. You serve your colleagues well, there's more harmony, there's more camaraderie, there's more synergy, right? So yeah, I think I like the idea of Dan and Natasha building on service being a much broader thing, right?
Well, as we invite Jim back into the conversation, I'm just wondering if there's other things that are inside of each of you that you want to bring into the conversation today.
I can bring up SPARK, the acronym SPARK. I think is very powerful because S is for service, P is for purpose, A is for attraction, R is for resilience, and K is for knowing. And that SPARK for me came through my own journey in Karachi when I was working with the refugees. I went to serve. In the process, I stumbled into my purpose, which is P. Then I had a big goal. I attracted a huge affirmation that made me strive higher, even though I struggled, but eventually I got there. R is the resilience. I went through many, many obstacles and eventually had a knowing that doesn't matter. It's really about every single day is what matters, right? It's not how many books you sell or how many people you impact. It's every day is a day of happiness and a day of service, a day of impact and a day of happiness. So that spark became a really powerful journey for me. That's the only thing I want to add.
Well, thank you all. This has been a very edifying. I was intrigued, Natasha, about your comment of the shower. And, 28 minutes in the shower. It'd be a little challenging in California with the drought. But what intrigued me was I've read a number of times over the years that in the Zen Buddhist tradition in Japan, they calculate that the optimal time for meditation is 28 minutes.
Mm.
And I was just wondering where the 28 came from in your sort of cosmology, and whether any of you have any comments about this relationship between a good shower and a good meditation.
Happy to answer that. So I needed to be, if I could be in a cave for 28 minutes, I'd be in a cave for 28 minutes. But downtown Toronto, the shower was the only cave that I had. I basically say you just want to be somewhere with whatever beast is ready to create a mess in your life is housed. So in California, please find a cave or just hide your cell phone because you can do a lot of damage from that little place. When it comes to the 28 minutes, I don't know if people are familiar with Dr. Daniel Siegel, but he's incredible. And Dr. Dan Siegel really talks about, and he does this handy little thing, which is very fun to teach your children. But he basically talks about the fact that the prefrontal cortex is the thinking brain. It's the part of the brain that understands that it's in time and space. It holds language, time, and space, and it knows that you're okay in March 2024, that you have options and choices. But here is what used to be known as the limbic system, right? We all kind of talk about it like the reptilian brain. That's the amygdala, and that's the warning signal. And it's attached to all of these neural pathways that still aren't safe. Because when you were a child, you took in all of those beliefs, and safety really means that someone will keep you. Because human beings are the only mammals that can't crawl to their own food or comfort source in infancy. So if you don't keep me, I don't survive. And as a young child, we take in all the beliefs about if I'm lovable, likable, have worth or value. And if I don't, you won't keep me and I'm a goner. And this is what gets triggered. So when your thinking brain is on, you're okay. You're on the planet. You know that you're fine. If someone triggers a belief that you haven't healed yet, there goes that thinking brain. And for me, I'm an animal. For other people, they hide. For other people, they try to people please. For other people, they don't get their needs met. Whatever safety strategy your body has wired. And it takes at least 28 minutes for your thinking brain that lives on the planet and knows it's a very bad idea to sell all your belongings and go to Fiji right now. It takes at least 28 minutes for that part of the brain to come back on. And again, if you have a lot of stored energy and unprocessed pain, it can take up to 3 days. And we all have this experience where we behave in a certain way and then we come back half an hour later or a day later and go, I'm so sorry. I wasn't myself. You weren't. You were operating from a different place. So again, in a cave, please, until this happens. Or even better, come and do some really good work with non-ordinary states of consciousness so we clear out all of this unprocessed pain. So you're kind of bulletproof on the planet in the sense that you live from that place of inner peace, understanding that the external world is not something that you need to be activated by all the time. So that would be my little piece there with Dr. Dan Siegel.
Great, 28
So
minutes. It's
So
amazing.
you don't actually need to turn the water on in the shower. You just need to get in the shower.
I haven't needed to shower since 2019. So, just a little tidbit. I still do, but just for the joy of it, not for the safety of it.
Ah.
Then your goal is to make 28 minutes into 28 seconds. So we can fast track the time.
Azim, I know that you have a regular meditation practice. How does that land for you? Is there a similar philosophy in the way that you approach it?
So I do it from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. and I do nothing. I have no rules, because if I tell you right now, don't think of a monkey, what's the first thought? So no rules. I become like a feather in the river. I float. And that's it's been really powerful for me. I started when I was 18. And I think if I look back in my life, two things that changed my life was meditation and service, right? I think those are the two wings of the bird.
Mm.
Well, it's worth contemplating. The Maharishi with TM, he came out with 20 minutes. That if you did at least 20 minutes a day, you could begin the process of achieving ongoing equanimity. So there's some relationship between time spent and the result obtained. That's really interesting notion that time plays a role in spiritual development. And actually, they've been able to time it literally like 28 minutes. It's an amazing thing. We normally think of spirituality and consciousness mostly in terms of space. We don't think about it much in terms of time. So that's why I was intrigued, Natasha, when you said the 28 minutes, because I remembered what Suzuki Roshi used to say about the optimal time of sitting in Zen practice. And then, another aspect that Azim, you're raising is the universal recognition by the mystics that early in the morning, some say 3 a.m., that 3 to 5 a.m. slot before the dawn is the optimal time, again, the time to meditate. And you're having that experience clearly. What would be your comment on all this, Dan, in terms of the optimal times to do these practices?
Yeah, thanks. I think there are a lot of different frameworks, time periods, and ways of looking at so much of this. So for me, my message often comes back to if someone is just starting out and this doesn't necessarily feel accessible, like 20 minutes of meditating, an hour meditating, I think that the key is regular commitment to a daily practice and self-grace and self-love. And if you miss a day, that's completely okay. And coming back to it, but feeling empowered and supported by the fact that you can do a lot in just a little amount of time, and that these frameworks and references are what we've studied in Buddhist monks and in different research studies. But you and your body is you and your body, and find what works for you. Natasha mentioned non-ordinary states, and Risio Institute has for several decades been doing work with breath work in accessing non-ordinary states. And I've spent time in plant medicine circles and guiding plant medicine in Costa Rica, and I think there's a similar insight here, which is no matter what you're doing or perhaps chasing, come back to basics and know that integration really is key, and integration is different for everybody. It happens in the body. and it's like a muscle. And so that is your sleep hygiene, your connection with your personal practices, getting out into nature, it's your diet. It's so many different things that you just need to pick and choose and calibrate what works for you in your system. And then you'll be on a really great track from there.
Well, let me just probe that in just a minute, because I think you opened up something very profound and very contemporary when you were saying that the integration happens in the body. And I'd love to open that up with all three of you, because traditionally, as you all know, mystics were ascetics. There was a negation of the body and a sort of a transcendentalist directionality to spirituality, so that nirvana was when you stopped reincarnating. You literally left the body. But you're making the assertion that the integration, that final piece, actually happens in the body. So I would love to hear from all of you your sense of the proper relationship between mindfulness and the body.
I'm happy to sort of speak to that for a moment, because it really is about what I teach, and what my whole practice is about is the fact that we're not here to actually transcend our humanness. We're here to merge and heal our humanness, because the only way that we can actually be walking lights on the planet and love on the planet is through this body, and through is this consciousness. And so I say to people all the time, you'd think I'd be so much more popular with the fact that I do sacred plant-based medicine journeys with people, but I'm very discerning about who we work with, because I say to people all the time, this isn't a lobotomy. Like, you're not here to like all of a sudden stop being this human person that you are. You're here to use these sacred plant medicines to go into all of the places that you're not being who you really are, going back to those neural pathways and what we brought in. So we go out, we transcend, we see who we actually are and are meant to be, our purpose on the planet. And then the integration piece is about remembering that every day and healing the parts that don't resonate with that vibration. But that's the practice. So as much as that's, funny getting in the shower, but when parts of me that are not me, that do not have light and love and the greatest intention for humanity come into me in the shower until I do the work to go in. So it is important to understand that our humanness is here to actually be the love and light on the planet. And how do we work with it? And all of the tools we have available to us, whether it be meditation, prayer, hold plunges, breath, they're all ways to purify, prepare, clear out the vessel that we are to be love and light. So that's what I would say about how we use the body.
Brilliant. Thank you. Azim, what would you say about the relationship between mindfulness and the body?
I'll just use one line, human body is a temple of God, carrying the soul, which is eternal. The soul is housed in the body, and there's a connection between soul, body, and mind, right? All three are connected. And when they're in sync, there's integration, as Dan was saying, there's power, and there's harmony, there is a synergy. The more your soul is nourished, the more it helps your body, the more it helps your mind. The more your mind is positive, helps your soul, helps your body. The more your body is active, helps your mind, helps your soul. It's a synergistic effect, the body of the mind and the soul.
Beautiful. Dan, what would you say?
Yeah, my two friends and colleagues here have summed it up so well. I think I definitely subscribe to the notion of a holistic approach that encourages not just the treatment of physical considerations, but also addresses mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. So whereas conventional or historical ways of looking at it may have had some separation, really the most integrated approach is what allows us to be present and connected with our environments and the people around us. And I love the image of one hand to the sky and the gods, and one kneeling on the ground touching the earth. And to me, that sort of union, whether we're talking about different religions or yoga or some of these practices, and finding how that shows up for you in your life and in your body is really what this is all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me offer a final area to explore by returning to this notion of time that seems to me to be very important. And I'd like to just bring in the conversation, the Kogi prophecy. You know, the time is not just individual, that time is historical, and that the context of your time influences the content of your spirituality. So for example, you know, it's one thing to be spiritual in a war zone. It's another thing to be spiritual when you're sitting on the beaches of Tahiti in relaxation, right? So context shapes content. And what we're being told by the Kogi prophecies and what we're being told by climate scientists who are predicting what they're calling an extinction event sometime in 2025, 2026. You have this confluence of secular time and prophetic time. And we humans are in this matrix now. So even though we tend to think of time and eternity and eternal verities in our lives and in our history and in our evolution, there are, I would say, coagulations of time and space that condense what is true with a particular potency. And that's the essence, in my view, of prophecy. And so I would just wonder, as we close, how each of you internalize or not, you know, what the Kogi are telling us. And just to review it, the Kogi prophecy is saying that between the December of 2023, when they offered it into the world, and June of 2024, the human family has an opportunity to rise to a higher alignment with the mother, because beginning at that time, she's going to restore herself. And the prophecy actually says that when she's done, less than 30% of the world will remain. So we have this impinging on our consciousness at this moment as climate change spins out of control, the geostrategic balance of powers spins out of control, AI is all over in a completely profound and challenging way. It seems that space and time are exploding and imploding simultaneously. And I'm just wondering how that affects or not the teachings that you're offering and the sense of spirituality informed conscious leadership. Does it take on a particular tonality given the moment in time in which we find ourselves?
It does for me, and I can speak to that. It depends on what audience I'm speaking to and what consciousness I'm speaking to. So when I'm talking about the reality of the neurobiological organism that you have, yeah, we live in space and time. And if I'm triggered in my physical body based on energies that haven't been healed, there are certain laws that are applicable to that. And that's 28 minutes. And what I've been doing for the last several years in preparation for the Kogi prophecy, which is very much in time and space, which is the next 2 years, is elevating my consciousness to a point that I'm actually transcending time and space, where my body can be activated, but I'm in such a high consciousness and understanding of what's happening that I no longer need to get in the shower. And that's how you transcend time and space. And I do agree as far as, 30% of the population has been doing this work to the point that they can maintain inner peace while their physical environment is being destroyed in preparation for the new earth. So we are jumping timelines in that space. When I'm speaking to people that are coming in their anxiety and depression, I have to go to the 3D world and use the laws of the consciousness that they're in. When I speak to other audiences that have done that work, I can get to that space, similar to people that I speak to in spiritual arenas that talk about there is no time and space. I go, okay, but your physical body is here. Are you connected to it? Because I don't know about you, but when I'm with my children, they want to feel my physical arms and they want it to resonate with my present heart. So I think the merging of time and space and being able to hold it in a consciousness that can be multidimensional in that sense is very important. And just going back to the conversation about all of us, where do you serve and contribute? I contribute the human beings that are trying to move into their spirituality from a grounded space so that they can be a part of all that's coming. Or as you opened up, Jim, are they prepared for the destruction that we're all going to be facing in the creation of the new? So that is really a place that I come from. And thankfully, I can use humor so it's not so goddamn terrifying for everybody, because it is going to be really important to stay in that state of inner peace. What a great conversation today. So that's my take on time and space.
Thank you. Azim, what would you say to our time?
I think when you talked about the Kogi approach and the connection to nature, I think nature has so many messages for us, the unconditional nature that gives unconditionally without any record keeping or scores or anything like that. And I think time is life, right? Time is life. All we have in this life is time. You're born here, you die here, and there's a dash between. The dash is the life, is the time, right? And then looking at each day as eternity, like each day is an eternity, each second is an eternity, each millionth of a second is an eternity. And when you look at each day as eternity, the day expands. It becomes so long because every second counts. Don't count the moments, make every moment count. So I think time is the only place where it's a level playing field. You could be a billionaire, you could be the poorest person in the world, but time-wise, we have equal, like. And I think this is where I think looking at time as the biggest gift we have, and how we use every second, every millionth of a second, and transform it to learn from nature and be the giver and find that deep sense of peace. And yeah, if Kogi philosophy says this period is the most powerful period, then let's make it most of it, because every second is powerful normally anyways. And if all we need is a bit of a
Good point.
boost to say there's going to be a multiplication of rewards if you do something now, so why not, right?
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. I love that notion of don't count every moment, but making every moment count. That's a nice line. Thank you. Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, thank you for such a deepening of the conversation, Jim. I'm just blown away by both the contributions of Natasha and Azim. Those were just really, really wonderful comments. And I think the Koji prophecy is talking about relationship to nature and urgency. I can speak a little bit to that through my view, but one of the areas that I also think is kind of globally relevant, and everyone is sort of still feeling the ripple effects of the pandemic, is this sort of awakening and moment where people are having more reflection and more a sense of mindfulness, which is an area that the prophecy touches on in this fast-paced, kind of technologically driven world, and especially in the Western lifestyle. We need that reminder to slow down, be present, and cultivate more intentional ways of living. Obviously, the relationship to nature, lots of research shows how beneficial it is to us, and sometimes we're out of touch with that. In the Western world, with industrialization and pollution and deforestation, consumerism has led to a lot of environmental degradation, and I know that's something that is really near and dear to everyone's heart on this call, and I'm sure in the audience. The Koji message really encourages individuals to reduce their ecological footprint and engage in conservation. And I think that there's also the importance highlighted of respecting and learning from Indigenous wisdom and former generations. I know for myself, in the Risio Institute, clinical founders and community elders, learning from eldership has been just such an important part of my journey. And there's such a difference between becoming older and becoming an elder in the way in which someone engages with passing forward wisdom and kind of supports and shows rather than just tells, models what they're talking about. And so the other piece that's, I think, really important to highlight is interconnectedness of all living things on Earth. The Koji prophecy speaks about that. And, you know, I think that in the Western context, to have more awareness of our impact of our actions on the environment and other communities globally, and promoting the shift from individualism to more collective and community-oriented mindsets. Little mention tomorrow on this stream, Interconnection and Unity. We've got some Indigenous leaders and some other really brilliant speakers. Tom, myself, and Jim will be on that one as well, so you can tune in there. But lastly, I think there's the view on just this more holistic approach to living and considering our physical, our mental, social, and environmental factors with a sense of urgency and responsibility. So I think integrating these principles, regardless of who the messenger is or what the format is something that will help all of us everywhere in the world live more intentional and healthy lives.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tom, any final words and then a tee up for tomorrow?
Yeah, just to pick up on a couple of comments that were made. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about meditation, and I would just remind our audience that take a more expanded view. If meditation doesn't work for you, if it's not part of your daily life, I would just encourage people to have a contemplative practice, whether it's prayer, time in nature, time with your children, time with your animal, whatever, but just creating time each day for that contemplative practice. The second point I would make, just talking about the body, as Peter Levine and his groundbreaking research showed us decades ago, that any trauma, any experiences we have get trapped in the body unless we allow it to process and move through. And so very much staying in relationship with body. And then finally, around time, we were an agrarian society just a couple of centuries ago. And then you started seeing clock towers showing up in communities that had wealth that could actually construct them. And then people started getting, pocket watches and then wrist watches. And now we don't have a device that doesn't have a clock on it. So our relationship with time has been completely shaped over the last 2 centuries through innovation, through technology, and through unintended consequence. And so if we can return to the natural cycles of nature and life, it can shift our relationship with time. And so delighted to continue this conversation again tomorrow with Dan on interconnectedness and unity. And just want a big thank you to you, Jim, and the audience today. And Natasha, always great to be with you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Natasha. I want to talk with you, Natasha, about having you back to tell the story of your book.
Happy to tell it. Talk about inner peace.
Well, that'll do it for us for today, everyone. You're welcome to the after session chat. The link is in the chat box, and you received it in your Zoom reminder for today. Natasha will be joining. I don't know whether, Dan, you can join the after chat for a few minutes. So you can join them in the after chat. Then we'll see all of you again tomorrow for our 4th of 5 sessions on spirituality and conscious leadership. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.